I'm just sitting there praying, and I'm journaling, and I instantly got back. I want you to know that I'm still on the throne and this is my kingdom. And what I want you to do is choose faith in this situation.
That's good.
And it just turned me loose.
What if you were able to sit down for lunch with some of the greatest leaders in the world? What would you ask? What would they say? Welcome to the Linch with a Leader podcast, where you're invited to join us in learning the spiritual principles behind big success. Here's your host, Mike Linch.
I love the phrase, when I became a better me, I became a better leader. That's what we're going to talk about on this episode of Linch with a Leader. If I have never met you before, my name is Mike, and it is my honor to welcome you on this leadership journey as we're all seeking to be the leaders that we were created to be in the spaces and places that God has put us. Well, I cannot say thank you enough for 2025 joining in our best year yet. Incredible guest. So many of you, you listen weekly. You not only listen to the episode, you listen to the takeaways episode and the text, the emails, the phone calls, the Facebook post, the Twitter post where you're telling about what you're learning. I just can't say thank you enough. It is a real gift because when you share on social or you leave ratings and reviews, it doesn't help me. We don't make any money off this. What it does is it helps other leaders find their way here. And man, that's where God gets a hold of their hearts. Thanks so much for all that you do. And you can leave ratings and reviews on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Massive, massive moves of those algorithms to get people this way. Well, today we get to sit down with an elite leader. In fact, he is the executive director of EntreLeadership Elite through Ramsey Solutions. We are all very familiar with EntreLeadership, one of the top leadership groups and gatherings in the world. And through Dave Ramsey, they have just moved the ball down the field in leadership. And John is the guy behind the folks. He's the guy making it happen. And once we unpack in this episode, you're going to see why he is in the seat that he is in. It's not where he started with Ramsey, but here's what I'll tell you. When you are a leader, you can't hide. People find you, and John has worked his way up. And so there are so many great nuggets in this conversation today. You're going to want a pen. You're going to want your Remarkable, your iPad. You're going to want something to write with and write on because there is some gold today. So I want you to pull up a chair, and I want you to listen in to my conversation with John Felkins. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Linch with a Leader. It is an honor to have you.
Thank you, Mike. Just like I was saying earlier, just honored to get to meet you and so excited to hear what you're doing.
Well, man, I'll tell you this, and I don't know how many people I've told this. Every Ramsey guest I've ever had has been solid. Two things. One, my expectations are high.
Yeah,
Number
that feels
two,
like a lot of pressure, Mike. Like you're due a bad one.
Number two, well, no. And number two, they always bring such great insight. So you work for a great place.
Well,
you work for an amazing place. So we're going to get into your career there, but I want to just ask you right out of the chute, what is it like being in that culture day to day? And what's that done for you as a leader in the middle of your career?
What is it like and what has it done for me? What it's like is, well, I think my favorite way to answer that or when I notice it, Mike, is when I step out of it. Because, I've been here about 13 years. So in some regards, I still feel like the new kid, and they just told me the other day, my employee number is now in the 90s and there's over 1,000 people here. So I've been here a minute, but I still kind of pinch myself. And it's like, it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like a mission. And every day is a new day. We even joke about like there's dog years and then there's Ramsey years because it doesn't feel like it's been 13 years. So my answer is it shaped me to the point where I don't think about it. It's my norm. But how I would answer your question is when I step out of this culture and I get around another organization and I see how things are done and I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they doing? What are they? I mean, like when you go to our kids' school and watch. And I love educators and appreciate them, and they're doing the Lord's work and they're out there on the battlefield every day. But how they run a meeting, it boggles my mind.
So you've been there 13 years. Take me back to John growing up. At this phase of life, what did you dream that you would be doing at this point in your life when you were growing up as a kid?
For sure, I was Tom Cruise in Top Gun. And now I don't know the demographic exactly of your listenership, Mike, but I mean the first meeting,
I
the
know,
first movie,
yes.
right? Not
Yes.
the second. Yeah, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I grew up on an almond farm. I had my own horse, and my mom would tell me, "Be home, by sundown," and I was gone. And I was exploring, and to this day, I'm a person that likes new things, likes new challenges. I'm not a farmer, even though I grew up on a farm. I'm not somebody that tends a plot of ground. I like to find new ground.
That is real. So think about that. We use a phrase all the time at North Star. God never wastes our time and he never wastes our experiences. How did God shape you that way? And how do you see even that being used now in your journey?
Well, let me take your second question and then I'll answer your first question. I think how it is used, we were talking earlier, we have a team, we have a coaching program here, and so we have a team of coaches. And I'll tell you, I got a lot of coaches on my team that are better coaches than I am. But I started the program. I was the first coach, and that is what my gifting is. And I joke sometimes and say that my spiritual gift is to not take no for an answer. I'm somebody that, likes to start things, bust through barriers, and make a way for other people to come and make it more civilized and more refined and more polished and more professional. And for a long time, I was insecure around that. And then I started to see those same people that were good at that piece of it weren't the people that would take the risk and stick their neck out and try something new. And then I thought, oh, you know what? We work well together because they do what they do and I do what I do. Now, so that's how it served me and still serves me. Where'd that come from? Well, I'll try and make this quick, but where that came from was how I was raised. My father was born, I know this is going to be tedious, but you got to hang with me, was born after his father was killed in World War II. So my grandpa came home on leave. My dad was conceived. My grandfather goes to the European theater, gets killed in World War II, and months later, my dad is born. Why does that matter? That matters because my father was a man that grew up not having anybody show him what to do. So I was raised by a man who never saw not knowing what to do or having done it before as a problem. It was just something that, that was just a part of the process. This needs to be done. We have no clue how to do it. It's never been done before, at least at our house. Okay, where do we start? Now, I'll just say quickly to you, and I know we're not going to get into marriage stuff so much, but my wife was raised by a surgeon who doesn't just start cutting and figuring out, oh, I wonder what this connects to, he knew exactly what to do every time he started a project. And so that was fun for the first 5 years of our marriage. But why am I the way I am? A lot because of where I come from, how I was raised.
That is so interesting. And we do some leadership learning groups around, and we're going through Steve Cuss's book, and he talks about family systems, and they're just such a big part of our journey. They're part of how God wired us. I heard Pete Scazzaro say, Grandpa, Jesus may be in your heart, but Grandpa's in your bones.
Yep.
And it is part of your journey that you can't unwind that.
That's right.
You just can't unwind it. So when did you got this exploration piece of you, this I'm going to figure it out piece of you. When did you begin to go, man, I might be able to be a leader. I might be able to be a person that other people would follow.
I don't think I've ever had that moment, Mike. I don't think I have ever thought of it that way. I think, you might want to explore this, you might not want to explore this, but what the moment that I had was, this needs to get done, and it doesn't seem like anybody else is doing it. And then I looked up, and other people were following in a path that had been blazed, and I was leading. And then I thought, there's responsibility that comes along with that. These people's day-to-day is dependent upon the path that I'm laying down. I need to do this well. It just was a responsibility that I I came to appreciate. It was never a moment of, hey, I think I could be a leader.
Well, that's interesting because there's two ways to go with that. Number one, it's interesting because in some ways you feel like you're temporary. I may be in this just for a good period of time, but I don't know how long, which is true of every leader. They're not going to be in it long.
That's right.
Something's going to change. But the second part of that is the humility that I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and do the best I can with it while I'm able to have it. So knowing that about you, how have you learned to grow in confidence when you go, I didn't even intend to be the one doing this?
Well, I'll steal a little bit from Dave here and tell you that, I graduated from the University of How Not to Do It, and our school colors are black and blue.
Uh,
So, confidence comes from figuring out how to do something, doing it working, and building on top of that. But when you consider or you define success not as it going well, but as I'm just going to be standing on the top of this pile of mistakes as opposed to laying underneath it, then it's the mindset of how you're going to tackle the next problem more than it is certainty that it's going to go well. It's just like I don't set my benchmark for success isn't batting 1,000 and never hitting a foul ball or never hitting a strike. My definition of success, and I'd say ours, and Dave has mentored our leadership team, me, and set the example. And I've seen this example in a lot of other places, probably a lot of people that you've talked to. The benchmark isn't the batting average. The benchmark for success is the willing to get in the batter's box again. And I think when we stay true to who God made us to be, and we don't confuse activity with entitlement, I don't think grace is opposed to activity and effort. I think it's opposed to entitlement. And so, we talk a lot about, work like it depends on you, pray like it depends on God, because God really is the one in control. God is the one that makes it happen, but He's not going to do it for you.
That's right.
So you got to get out of bed and you got to go plant the seeds and you got to do what you got to do. And so for me, success and confidence comes from, you know what, Mike, I ain't quitting. I'm not going to quit. I might stub my toe today. Something that I didn't plan for might happen today, but I'm going to keep coming, and I'm just going to keep coming, and I'm going to keep coming. And I think God honors that
100%.
when it's pointed in the right direction.
That's exactly right. And resiliency in anything's the name of the game. And that ability to get back up and that ability to bounce back. How has your faith played into the who? I know we're going to get into your what's here in a second. How has your faith played into the who part of you and how it shapes how you lead?
That's such a good question. Well, I mean, the thing that pops in my head right off the bat is it's not about me. It's about Him. It's about the Lord. It's about serving His children and being who He wired me to be. Now, I say that, but as soon as I say that, it's like, well, where is the playbook? Where is the manual on knowing who He meant me to be? And I think it's pretty obvious to us as believers. We can get distracted from it, but Christ is the template. That is who He meant me to be. I'm His, and that's the example. Now, I will tell you, how does that play out? Well, as a leader, how it plays out for me is where the rubber meets the road is all the way down to how do I react to that team member? How do I make that decision? How does it materialize? What does it actually look like? If Mike Linch was a private investigator and he just came to the office and just sat back and just watched me operate, what would he see? Well, on the days where I don't leave Jesus in the parking lot and bring Him into the office with me, which theologically is all wrong, but I think you get my point.
Makes for a great youth skit, though.
There you go.
Make for a great one.
Last night I was worried about stuff, and I could have come in this morning with a tight fist and barked orders, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And by the grace of God, because there's lots of times I haven't done this, I said, Lord, in this situation, what do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? And I was sitting in my Jeep while my daughter was in the gym training jiu-jitsu, and I'm just sitting there praying, and I'm journaling, and I instantly got back. I want you to know that I'm still on the throne, and this is my kingdom. And what I want you to do is choose faith in this situation.
That's good.
And it just turned me loose, Mike. It just was like, yeah, this isn't, this is His show. This is His kingdom. This is His economy. This is His currency. I'm called to be faithful. And that's what I need to do in this situation. Come back tomorrow. It's going to be there tomorrow, and do what I know that needs to be done with the mindset of he's the one that's going to guide my steps, and be open to his direction. And that's so then if you're that private investigator just watching me operate, I come in with a much more at peace presence and style of interaction with my team. And then that leadership infects how the team's day goes, and how they show up to clients. Because I don't mean to get down a rabbit trail, right? But the best way that I can serve my clients, our clients, when I'm 2 or 3 layers away from the clients, is how I serve the team. And so I hope that answers your question.
It
but
does
that's
answer
real
my
world.
question 100%. And here's what I love about it, John. What it says is that faith permeates every area of your life, and you can't separate, well, this is what I do, and this is my leadership over here, but this is what I do on Sundays. No, it's a mixture, right? It's all mixed in who you are, and that reminder that God's got it. You're going to be okay. You didn't just end up here. He got you here.
That's
He's going to take care of you. And I love your story, because there was a point in your journey you weren't building leaders, you were building bridges, which
That's
is an
true.
amazing career in and of itself. I know some guys that do that for a living and do very well at it. What got you from bridge building to people and company building?
Yeah. So I want to say a name because he deserves a lot of credit. There's a gentleman named Ken Utek. A shout out to Ken. I got invited to be on a leadership team at my church, and I was still bridge engineer, John. And just so everybody knows, Mike and I don't mean, we are the people like figurative bridges. We're talking about cars and trucks.
That's right.
Over river bridges. And so I joined that leadership team, and Ken came in. And he had a personality profile, and he was going to do team building with this leadership team at our church. And he had his own personality assessment, and we all took it. And he went around a circle and talked to us about it. And I remember him looking over his glasses at me, and then looking at my results and looking at me. And he said, "John, what do you?" And I said, "I'm an engineer." And he looked at my results. He looked over his glasses, and he said, "No, you're not."
Wow.
I was like, "What?" And I really spent about 3 days arguing with him. And at the end of that 3 days, he finally said to me, "John," he said, "what I'm saying to you is you've done what you've done in spite of how God has made you, not because of how God has made you." And it was like the clouds parted and the sun came down and the white doves fluttered off into the sky, because I was like, man, this is a moment. This is absolutely the case. I beat my brain out getting through engineering school, because that process, we don't have to go into that, but that whole experience, that whole journey was to prove that I wasn't stupid to people that said I was.
How about that?
And not that there weren't things that were redeeming and worthwhile in the process, but my motivation was to prove that I wasn't dumb. That's why I got 2 degrees in engineering. Ken changed my life. The Lord used Ken to change my life. And over the coming season, after that moment, I essentially said, "Ken, I want to learn to do what you do.
Wow.
And I want to help people in the way that you have helped me." And I was in Memphis at the time, and started flying back and forth to Green Bay, Wisconsin on a regular basis, because that's where he was out of. And I started to learn this business.
Is crazy.
Yeah.
What was it? What was his personality profile? Was it like a Myers-Briggs disc?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah. He had worked with a psychologist. So he was a marriage and family therapist.
Okay.
That had gotten into working with a lot of the leadership at Procter & Gamble. And then he got with a psychologist, and they developed their own proprietary tool. And it was values based, and he ran it on, all of us. I don't even know if it's commercially available. I'm not being coy about it. I really don't know, or if he even had a name for it. But if he's hearing this, he'll kill me for not giving him a shout out. But people can look him up and ask him. But yeah, it was a pivotal moment in my life.
Yeah. Oh, I bet it was. So I want to sit on this for a second. What would you tell somebody who's listening today that goes, "You know what, John, that's where I'm at. I think I am ill-fitted for the role that I'm in."
Yeah.
What would you tell them would be some next steps for them?
Well, I think that's a really good question, Mike. And it's a question that we shouldn't be rash in answering for
That's right.
ourselves. Because on the other side of this, I really appreciate what Mike Rowe says about passion. because you hear a lot about like find something that you're passionate about, like find your, people say this kind of thing, right? Like find your dream job. It'll never be like a day of work in your life. And Mike would say, and Mike's a good friend of our organization and we've gotten to spend time with him. He would say, find something that you can become passionate about, and of course he's coming from the perspective of a massive gap in the trades, and we just need people that can wire houses and plumb bathrooms and weld pipes, and which is true. And you don't see a lot of that glamorized in media today, but it is in fact what makes our civilization work. And so on one hand, I'm a little bit hesitant to say, hey, just find a thing that you were called to do. I think you can find something that you can be good at and become passionate about. The reason why I think that it worked for me or why I had that style of moment was because I was literally doing what I was doing for the wrong reason. Like I said, I beat my brains out in all of the calculus classes in engineering, go into design engineering, sitting at a computer all day. Now, remember my story that I shared with you. I'm the kid that grows up on the farm with his own horse and goes wherever he wants until the sun goes down. And now I have to sit at this computer all day long and type on the keyboard. Well, who thinks that's a good idea? How in the world did I find myself there? Well, I quickly escaped the office, make it out onto projects, and I'm a project engineer. Now I'm at least outside, but I'm still in this whole industry and am in a role where the value of how that role is done is a whole mindset and a way of thinking that is counter to how I'm wired. So it wasn't like this magical thing. It was just I was going against the grain, and Ken helped me recognize that fact. And so it was really powerful for me. But I don't want to convey to people there's just only one job out there for you. And if you find that job that you're passionate about, it'll be easy and you'll make a ton of money the rest of your life. I'm not saying that either.
No, it is such a union. I've worked with plenty of leaders through the years. It's such a unique thing that when you discover that and God opens another door, and it's never an opportunity to just abandon your family and go destitute and poor and, well, I'm just chasing, I feel like I'm supposed to be whatever.
Right.
I remember Jim Collins saying something about it years ago, and he said, it's where what you're good at and what you're passionate about meet in the middle, and it's what you can get paid for.
That's right.
And it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
you're able to make a living at it. So as you look at it now, how did your time engineering building bridges, how does that play into what you do, engineering, building teams and people and companies and all that you do now with EntreLeadership? How does all that work together?
Well, the way that I think about your question is like, what did I bring with me? What did I bring with me from the engineering world? And I think some of the things that I brought with me, and again, my period in an office in a design engineering seat was short. Most of it was construction engineering and out in the field. So part of what I brought in is the sense of urgency that happens around construction, because the most expensive thing on a job is time. So we don't waste time. We push, we go. And of course, that can be a blessing and a curse, but I brought that with me. That urgency. I brought a how does this all work together, aka a systems perspective. You and I were talking about family systems a little earlier. What's the system? What is all feeding into this? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What are the parameters? Some of that critical thinking kind of stuff. And then honestly, part of what got me into engineering is just the curiosity. How do things work? And I am fascinated with how people work and how leadership works and how teams work. And so that curiosity piece, I brought that with me also.
As you work with leaders now, what are some common things that you're seeing in how they work and how things work that are holding leaders back from being all that they could be, and they're not able to embrace the best version of themselves in their companies?
Sometimes I get the chance to go and speak at companies, and one of the things that seems to resonate is when we talk about limiting beliefs and the internal dialogue that we have as leaders, I think is a massive contributor to the gap between what God has wired into us, the potential that He has wired into us, and how we're showing up and living in a day in and day out, because we say things to ourselves. We have this internal dialogue that's, I wasn't meant to do this. I don't have what it takes to do this. And I'm not smart enough to do this. And then what happens is, it isn't that we necessarily have to accept that for it to be a problem. We also can counteract against that, and that creates problems too. We can try, like I was doing, we can try and prove that it's not true as opposed to finding the truth and centering on the truth. And then if we're just spending our energy and our days proving that we're not dumb, that creates just as much problems as it does surrendering to the lie that we're dumb. So I would say that, to pointedly answer your question, I believe the negative self-talk that we have, because everything else we can learn. We can hire somebody that already knows it. Everything else is figurable, outable. And, character, courage, determination, these are the things that will get us to where we need to go. The rest of it can be God along the way.
You know that, the limiting beliefs. You teach on it. How have you learned to overcome it for yourself? Because we all feel it. It's every leader I've ever worked with has the impostor syndrome. And if they don't, they're jerks and nobody wants to work for them. So there are those guys too.
Right.
How have you learned to overcome limiting beliefs?
Well, let me say, I'm not batting 1,000. Okay. I'm not saying I don't ever get caught up in that, but my favorite way to look at that is thoughts aren't thinking. I heard somebody say that once. Thoughts aren't thinking. Negative self-talk, we have to apply zero effort. They just come to us. Those things happen, right? That voice from deep within our biology, from the enemy, from resistance, however we want to talk about it, they come with no effort. Thinking is the active talking we do to ourselves. So thoughts are just the things that naturally happen inside of our head that aren't always helpful. And thinking is the proactive, this is who I am. This is who God made me to be. I'm choosing faith by grace in this. I know who still sits on the throne. We can figure this out. None of that happens on its own. All of that is a choice to say, I am going to think this is why. I mean, you've had John Deloney, right? So he's got, more degrees than a thermometer. I don't, but he'll tell you the prefrontal cortex is how we think about thinking. And so that part of our brain that we say, wait a minute, that's not a helpful thought. I'm going to change that. So I would say, to answer your question, it is when I do that well, it is to notice that the thoughts I'm having aren't helpful, to interrogate those thoughts and say, is that true? Where'd that come from? What's that about? And then when it tests negative, I say, I'm going to flip this on its head because, you're not smart enough to do this. Maybe I don't know how to do it right now, but I'm going to replace that thought with, I'm going to learn how to do this. I can figure this out. I can go talk to Mike Linch. He can explain it to me because he knows, he's been there. I can reach out to a friend. And so reversing those negative thoughts to something that's helpful and being proactive and spending the energy to do it. That's how I do it. And it's a muscle, right? The more we do it, the stronger it gets and the quicker we can do it.
It's funny. And you will do it over and over and over. You think back to the limiting beliefs when I was 3 years in my role. Now I'm 28 years at the same place doing the same thing. And now the limiting beliefs look a little different. Now they have to do with age and they have to do with all the other pieces of, well, there's probably somebody younger that could do it better. So let me ask you this question. What are you doing? Man, you lead high level leaders, both internally and externally. How do you continue to develop and grow so you can stay out in front of those premier leaders that you have been challenged to shepherd and lead?
Well, you asked me earlier on, what's it like with the culture here at this company?
Yeah.
A good thing about this company is there's not a lot of moss grows on the rock here because the rock is rolling. That stone keeps rolling on. And that's that oil drips from the beard of Dave Ramsey. That's, Dave, I heard him say just the other day, he has two modes, asleep and moving. And personality wise, that's how he is. And so that's the culture of our organization. And so there's a little bit of what I'm confessing to you is the expectation. It is the norm that we continue to read. We continue to work on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm saying, Mike, is your question is a question that we in leadership at this company continually ask ourselves,
Yep.
what do
Yep.
I need to be doing? And so, as you can imagine, this year, 2025, I have absolutely binged on artificial intelligence, how it can ethically be applied, where it should be applied, where it shouldn't be applied, how do we leverage it, what pitfalls are there. And so I've really had to go to school on all that stuff because, you either create the wave of innovation, you catch the wave, or you get crushed by the wave.
100%.
We're not creating this wave, but we don't want to get crushed by this wave. So we got to pay attention to it and figure out how to catch it and make use of it. And so podcasts, books, lectures, I'm still just, lifelong learner, everything I can to get the information to be not relevant for relevance sake, but to keep my ear to the ground and what's going on in industry and the world and staying current. Current is a better word. Now, I say all that. All of that sits on the top of what happens at my desk in between when I wake up and when the rest of the family wakes up in the morning. And that's a journal, and that's the word. And I can learn everything I want about AI, but there's nothing new under the sun. Reading Solomon, and what he was thinking, and reading essentially King David's journal. Thank goodness he wasn't on medication, because we can see all of his ups and downs.
Never thought about that. That's a great, great thought. Oh, that's good.
That's the anchor. That's the starting point. It gets me pointed in the right direction every single day. And then, like I said, go learn everything else that I can to help lead.
I've heard you make a statement before on another podcast. You said, I became a better me, then I became a better leader. When you got better as a person, how would you say, what was the correlation of that making you a better leader?
So how did it make me a better leader?
Yeah.
Well, you can't give to other people what you don't have yourself. So take that as a data point. Then I heard it said, rest is not the antidote for burnout. Wholeheartedness is. Now, what I mean by that and what I take from that, Mike, is if I roll into the office and I feel inside of me a whole bunch of impatience and I have to expend energy to behave differently than how I feel on the inside so that I don't just, get after people and give them a hard time, but lead with grace, then I'm expending energy to alter. Then it's just a behavior modification game. And the expenditure of all that energy is what will burn me out. Now, if I dial that back and I start to look at, why do you feel so impatient? And what is that about? And are you keeping in mind the fact that God's still on the throne? This is his kingdom and he's going to take care of it. And your job is only to be faithful with what he's got in front of you right in this moment. And I just show up differently and rest in that fact. And at the same time, work hard, but have my head screwed on straight about who's in charge, then I'm not expending all of this energy to modify my behavior so that I attempt to come off as patient with people. I can have patience for people because I have patience for myself because I've received the patience and the grace that God has given me. And then I'm just a conduit of what he has for the team. It doesn't feel like work then. It feels like just staying connected to the vine and abiding in who he is and letting what he has for the team and the customer and the world have what it has. And so doing that internal work, that is with that guy that's in the mirror that I'm looking at every morning, and starting there, it causes me to show up different and be somebody that's more patient, that has grace for others, that also has courage when others' performance or character or whatever else, I'm not leading through a popularity contest. So it isn't always just like, oh, I show up with peace and everything's just easier. That's actually not the case. Sometimes it's show up with courage and have a hard conversation that normally I would avoid because I didn't want somebody to, not approve of me. And so staying plugged in and doing that work internally and letting God work on who I am, I like to say, letting the Holy Spirit and Mrs. Felkins work on who I am allows me to be me and not be an act at work, because that is what will burn you out, doing something that isn't you, that your heart isn't in. That's what kills leaders.
Man, that is as good an answer as I've ever heard to that. That is really good.
It's the only one I know, Mike.
Yeah. And anybody in the world needs to hear that, but your wife didn't need to hear that part. So we'll leave that part out, but all the rest
No,
of it
no,
was,
she'll take satisfaction in the
she'll take
acknowledgement
satisfaction.
that
She got
she's
in the
on
Holy
team.
Trinity.
Yeah.
That's solid. Because it is an integrated life, and it is a lot less work to have to do that. All right, final question. My hour's up. I can't believe it. I got a lot to cover with you. I'm gonna have to get you back because I got
Let's do it.
a lot to uncover. David said, it says in Scripture, David served his purpose in his generation, and then he went to sleep. What do you believe was the purpose that you, John Felkins, growing up on an almond farm, now sitting in Nashville, Tennessee, what do you believe was the purpose God created you for?
Gosh, well, that is such a good question. I hope you edit out all this dead air time as I think about that. I think what my purpose is, of course, I can say theologically, I don't want to be trite, but of course it's to serve and glorify Him, reflect His image back. I think that's all true, but in a way, it's like that's not really what you're asking me. You and I, that's almost an assumed baseline, right?
Yeah.
You're basically asking me the question, yeah, but how for you? And I have said, I think that my spiritual gift is that I am somebody that is willing to try what hasn't been tried and do what hasn't been done. And I think that a lot of people were coming to hear how Dave Ramsey built a kingdom, honoring business with integrity, but also with impact in the marketplace, which a lot of people would use the word successful to say that. He was doing everything he could and he was teaching people, but he couldn't be everywhere all the time. And people were calling and saying, okay, I believe and understand what Dave has said, but it's harder to do than it is to understand. Can you help me? Can you walk with me? And the company had no answer to that. And so in 2012, I came and I started the coaching program. But all that stuff about me getting out of engineering and all of that came before that point. I had started my own firm. So the Lord was directing my path. I've had a hard time looking out the windshield saying, this is the exact map that God has laid out for me. But man, I can look in the rearview mirror and see where He directed my steps. And so I struggle a little bit with the question looking forward, but looking backward, it sure does seem like helping business owners fulfill the potential that He has wired into them is the purpose that He put me on the planet for.
Thank you for listening to the Linch with a Leader podcast with your host, Mike Linch. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help more people hear it by subscribing and leaving a review wherever you may be listening. For full episode notes and more spiritual leadership resources, visit MikeLynch.com.